and welcome to the Building Sociology Poddy, where we talk about better buildings to live and breathe in. My name is Jess Kismet. Today, we are diving into the world of healthy homes with Zara D'Cotta, founder of The Healthy Home. Zara is a building biologist who specialises in how our homes impact human health. Through her Healthy Building Materials Mastermind, she educates forward-thinking home designers and builders, and her latest program, Low EMF Home Design and Construction, helps industry professionals understand the impact these invisible forces might have on our bodies and take practical steps towards reducing exposure. Today, we are going to chat about what makes a truly healthy home, how to make better material choices, and what Zara's latest EMF study has taught her. Welcome, Zara.
Thank you, Jess. It's great to be here. I'm a big admirer of your work and I know you're doing really important things in the building industry, and I really appreciate you inviting me on and opening the floor for this very important conversation.
Awesome. It's my pleasure to have you on the show. So let's start with where Zara D'Cotta became the Healthy Home, the founder of the Healthy Home. I know that your story, the origin story, links back to your own health journey. Isn't that right?
Yep.
So I know it's been quite tumultuous for you. So could you tell us a bit about what led you here to begin with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's been many layers to it, but in a nutshell, it started with breast cancer 12 years ago, which led me to understanding the link between carcinogens in our food and our environment and cancer. And then 2 years later, a melanoma diagnosis, and the compounding effect of those two experiences and 30 doses of radiotherapy after going through cancer led me to the discovery. Well, my immune system was in a very compromised state, and I had a long list of symptoms that no one could diagnose, and found out that I am one of the 1 in 4 people that is genetically susceptible to mold. And I had a naturopath that suggested I get my home assessed for mold, and the building biologist that came to my house, actually, he found slightly elevated levels of mold, but he actually felt that EMF was a bigger contributor to my symptoms at that point in time. Yeah, that first opened me up to the world of building biology and making changes in my own home to get my health back. And then through a series of house moves and trying to find a home to live in that would enable me to heal, and facing a choice between older water damaged buildings or then eventually moving into a home that was newly built, but then experiencing issues with off-gassing of building materials and a number of symptoms for the first few months, that led me down my formal studies and training in building biology over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Seriously. For those who are sensitive, moving into a house, buying a house, renting a house, building a house, it's all very hard to navigate.
That's why I've chosen not to make a commitment to another house at the moment.
Yeah. I'm thinking about doing my own thing next year, and that's sort of evolving at the moment. Do we build? Do we buy? And there's just so many considerations, and simply knowing that people will routinely paint over mold. Well, they'll paint their houses when they go to sell them to make them look pretty, and they'll paint over mold without realizing what they are potentially exposing the new owner to.
Yep, it is quite daunting, the prospect
It's a
of looking for
minefield.
a house to buy or rent, and not really
Yeah,
knowing
yeah.
until you get in it what challenges it might pose for you.
I know. And wow, 2 bouts of cancer, that's pretty rough. Serious cancer, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm here to tell the tale, and I wouldn't have found my way to this work otherwise. And it lights me up in so many ways. So it's the most
Yeah, well,
challenging situations have been, some also the best things have ever happened. So
yeah, and we're very glad to have you, and the industry is benefiting from your experience and your knowledge.
thank you.
So a lot of people have these sorts of health wake-up calls, but not a lot of people turn it into a mission to help others. So how did you go from learning about your own health and how your environment affected your own health? How did you turn that into educating homeowners and designers and builders the way you do?
My intention initially was to help homeowners. So I had a course for residential homeowners embarking on their own renovations or builds to share my research on the health impacts of building materials and home design. And I really felt it was mainly women. Well, it was all women taking on this huge amount of learning and facing serious uphill battles getting their husbands and builders on board with this stuff. So I was very delighted very early on that I had an architect and builder actually wanting to do my residential course, and then the architect saying this is actually really important information that everyone in the industry needs to know, and then expanding my offering to include building industry professionals. And then as changes to the National Construction Code came about in 2023 in relation to condensation management, I then realized that, going all in on my focus on building industry professionals was really important and a great way to accelerate the pace of change, because for every project that this knowledge gets applied on, for one every designer or builder that takes in this knowledge and they apply it to multiple projects, and we are seeing some really tangible impacts of that knowledge being implemented. So that's how I've ended up where I am.
Yeah, awesome. And as I often complain about, there's no CPD for builders. There's nowhere for them
Mm,
to go to learn, and
yeah,
no official pathway for them to go down to
yeah,
continue to educate themselves. So, people like yourself putting the information out there in a readily accessible way is so important, because otherwise, yeah, the learning
yeah.
just kind of is stagnant. And
And full credit, I have to say, to all the builders that are doing the extra learning, because as I'm
Mm,
here in the USA at the moment, I'm really seeing that what is happening in Australia in the construction industry is very unique by global standards. And we have there's a lot of builders that we and designers that we have to thank for really getting this movement going.
yeah, absolutely. It's their time is very valuable. Time is money, and I always, whenever we run courses, I always take the time to thank them for taking the time out of their day, because
Yeah.
it's expensive, and especially when they'll send across supervisors and trades. Multiple hours are spent in this additional learning. So yeah, kudos to those businesses. So your building materials mastermind has been quite popular amongst builders, and for many of them, it's their first step into this world of better building. And you are quite outspoken about some materials that are marketed as sustainable or eco-friendly, but they're not necessarily as such. So what are some examples of materials that you have come across that might surprise people with their credentials not being quite so up to scratch?
Sure. I think one big one is low carbon concrete. It's great to focus on reducing CO2 emissions, but that shouldn't be the only yardstick by which we measure how much better a material is, because often they're
Mhm.
replacing the cement with fly ash, which is a industrial byproduct of coal production that can contain trace elements that are radioactive or heavy metals. So yeah, I think that's something that we need greater transparency on and awareness in the industry.
Mhm.
Another one is the presumption that because a material is recycled, then it's a better choice. And while I love circularity, we do, like, for insulation, for recycled insulation, for example, we need to also be asking the manufacturers, what are the binders? What's it treated with? Uh, is it made up of polyester binder as well that could impact the vapor permeability? What's the
Mhm.
vapor profile of the product? And this is information that they're often not willing to provide. So these are questions that I think people need to be digging into as well.
I'm wondering if they just they just don't know the answers, because a lot of these sorts of questions are not what they're thinking about when they're manufacturing these products.
To be honest, I think you're 100% spot on. But what I've loved recently is I've had a few manufacturers actually reaching out to me because they're getting more questions from home designers and builders in our community. And they're saying, okay, what further testing do we need to be doing? What further information do we need to be providing? So I think we are seeing a shift, and there are manufacturers that genuinely want to do better. And I'm hoping that I can help them be able to be more transparent and provide the sorts of information that home designers and builders that I work with want to know.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. So on the flip side, there are materials that could be potentially underappreciated, that are
Yeah.
healthy, durable, and genuinely good for building health. So do you have some
Yep.
examples of those?
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. So the first one that you'll know that I'm very passionate about is wood fiber insulation, and I know there's barriers to that being used on a larger scale, often due to cost and the fact that it's imported at the moment. But it does seem to be bulletproof in response to moisture. I know a builder that went to a roof space where there'd been roof leaks and there was moldy plasterboard, and the wood fiber was still intact. I've seen it on a building site after months of rain, and there's not a sign of mold, whereas oriented strand board sitting next to it had mushrooms growing on it. So
Yeah.
that's a product I really love. And then the other ones are like lime and clay renders. So there's some big aha moments happening within our mastermind community, and designers and builders realizing that if you put a cement render on concrete or brick walls, then it traps moisture in, and realizing the benefits of using a vapor permeable hygroscopic render so that moisture can actually pass through the wall without, and not resulting in trapped moisture or mold.
Yep. Yep, definitely. So your latest work focuses on electromagnetic fields. This is an area that you have been researching for quite some time now, quite a few
Yeah.
years, and
Yeah.
you are now completing your advanced certification in the US.
Yes.
So you mentioned EMFs in the beginning of this conversation in regards
Yeah.
to your health.
Yeah.
Is this what is this the thing that really drew you towards learning
Yeah.
more about EMFs, and
Yeah.
what has been your biggest learning curve?
Yeah. So I will never forget the moment I had the building biologist standing in my living room with his meter, where I was getting heart palpitations at the time only in the living room. And he had his meter, he's with a directional antenna, and was able to identify the neighbor's Wi-Fi router on the other side of the wall as the source of radio frequency exposure, which absolutely blew my mind. It's not something I'd ever considered before. So that was 10 years ago now. And ever since then, I've done extensive research into peer-reviewed medical studies. 5 years ago, I started formal training in building biology. I'm initially focusing on, from an EMF point of view, how materials can impact electroclimate, and then building out frameworks for how to reduce exposure levels in home design and construction. And then for the last 2 years, I've been traveling to the USA to do intensive training with world-leading mentors who are not only EMRS specialists, but electricians and electrical engineers that are really at the forefront of measuring and detection and mitigation in this field. One of the biggest learning curve is often people will say, they'll come to me with a solution like a shielding product and say, will this block EMFs? And the biggest learning is that there are 6 different types of EMF, and they all behave differently, and they need to be addressed. They're tested and mitigated differently in home design and construction.
Okay, so I've got a few questions that have come out of that answer. Firstly, what does EMRS stand for?
Yeah, so it's electromagnetic radiation specialist.
Okay, so it's the name of a profession.
Yes. So
Yep. Okay.
electromagnetic radiation and electromagnetic field are 2 terms that are used interchangeably.
Okay, and what are the 6 types of radiation?
Yep. So we have AC electric fields. So think emanating from building wiring, appliances. So I'm sitting here now next to a power outlet. Even if there's nothing plugged in, there's nothing turned on, there's still an electric field coming from the building wiring, the hot wiring.
Mhm.
There's an AC magnetic field. So if you've got an appliance plugged in, it's drawing current, there's an AC magnetic field. We've got microsurge electrical pollution, which is also known as dirty electricity. So that can emanate from building wiring and appliances as well. There's radio frequency radiation from wireless technology. There's DC electric fields, which is direct current from batteries. And then there's DC magnetic fields. So there's natural sources of radiation, and there are what we refer to as geopathic stress. That's probably one of the ones that's considered more esoteric and less understood and less quantifiable and measurable. So anomalies in the earth, ley lines, underground water lines that can impact.
Okay. Well, my knowledge on all of this stuff is practically zilch. So is there anything you could, any hot tips or quick tips you can give us on what the worst types are, or what?
Yeah, so the 3 that we want to really focus on in home design and construction are radio frequency radiation, which is high frequency and quite prevalent in today's world, AC magnetic and AC electric fields. They're what we want to be considering in the design stage.
And where do they come from? You have to remind me. You just went through that, but I've forgotten.
Oh, that's okay. So radio frequency radiation, think of it as your wireless technology. So your phone towers, your wireless router, your microwave. AC electric and magnetic fields are your devices, your power outlets, your building wiring, power lines.
So it's just kind of standard electrical wiring in a home?
Yes. Yep. And then dirty electricity or microsurge electrical pollution, which can come from light switches, again, building wiring, can come from the power grid. Yeah.
Okay. And so to reduce these sorts of exposures, what do we do? Like, we can't unplug everything and have no power. So what do you suggest that we do?
Yep. So we can have demand switches that turn certain electrical circuits off at night. So that can make a big difference to exposure levels while we're asleep. That's really, we want to be focusing on like our living areas and our workspaces where we're spending the most amount of time. And then for radio frequency radiation, having hardwired Ethernet points throughout the home so that you can disable Wi-Fi. So often, the biggest exposures are inside the house. So thoughtful design choices and use of technology can significantly reduce exposure levels. And then things like not having electrical panels. Like I've just been assessing a home where there's the main electrical panel behind one bed and the sub panel behind another bed. And that's really the cause of a lot of issues that these people are experiencing. So those 3 things implemented in the design stage can make a profound difference so that when the occupants move in, they're not having to deal with issues relating to the sub panel, or it's just very easy for them to be able to hardwire their internet if they want to.
Yep. So the location of these electrical panels, the switchboards. So what you're saying is it's about proximity.
Yes, distance. Distance is your best friend.
Yeah. So just
the further away you are from the source, the better.
And when that comes to things like switches beside our bed, we obviously can't, would you recommend in the design phase, for example, moving those switches further away from each side of the bed? What's the
Well,
solution there?
and you've got to balance this with what is actually going to be practical for the homeowner. If that means that they're not going to use those switches, and it's not going to work. But I've
Have
been
really
on
long
quite a few.
cords.
Yeah, I've been on quite a few healthy home site visits in the last month in the USA, and low EMF design is becoming a feature in healthy home builds. And in
Mhm.
each of the projects that I've been to, they have demand switches. So next to where the bedside table will be, there is just a switch. So the person in the room can turn off the electrical. If they want the ability to have Wi-Fi on and off interchangeably, they can just literally with a flick of a switch.
Okay, so instead of turning off the light at the switch on the cord, you would turn it off at the source on a different switch when you go
Yeah,
to
because
sleep.
that will actually turn off the hot wire in the wall as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then also think of the layout of the home. So where's the oven going to be? Where's the fridge, the TV, the solar inverter, all those sorts of things. You want to be maintaining distance from them and beds, couches, and desks.
Mm. I can imagine that can be quite tricky in some, smaller blocks, smaller homes. That can be quite tricky to maintain distance. What
Yes.
sort of distance is there a set distance that's safe?
It depends on what type of field we're talking about. So if we're talking about your oven or your electrical meter board, like at least 2 meters.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So does that mean like when I was pregnant, I can remember I would put my lunch in the microwave and then I would back away from the microwave because
Oh,
I don't know,
okay.
this was circulating around in my head back then. This was quite some time ago now,
Yep.
but I remember thinking it's probably not a good idea to stand next to the microwave. And I would just kind of go to the next room or stand back.
Yeah, so microwave radiation is quite different. We actually did a very interesting test on that at our training. We were in a two-story house and there was quite a few of us with meters and we had people positioned upstairs, downstairs, outside the house. We turned the microwave on and that radiation was beaming permeating through the entire home.
Yeah,
So
right.
the lesson there was get rid of the microwave.
We've all got
if you
microwaves and we
if you
love
want a
our
healthy home,
microwaves.
I did away with mine about 10 years ago and I've
Yeah,
never missed it. It's just a mindset shift. Just use the
yeah,
stove or the oven instead.
yeah.
Yep.
Actually, I did go for about 18 months without one and I lived. I heated up my, whatever I needed on the stove and, it was fine. I survived.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, that's a very easy win.
Yeah. Are there any
Yep.
other easy wins?
What else? So if you're working at your laptop, like charging it overnight and not having it plugged in when you're working at it, that reduces your exposure levels.
Hmm.
I use air tube headsets rather than earpods so that I'm
What's an
not
air
relying
tube
on.
headset?
So
Like just corded?
yeah, it's got a plastic jacket here and metal here because metal is electrically conductive, so it's not carrying
I
the.
see.
Yeah, it's not. I don't have the electrically conductive component here, and I'm not relying on AirPods, which rely on Bluetooth, which emits very high levels of radio frequency radiation.
It's time for a quick sponsor shout out. Today's episode of the Building Sciology Potty is proudly brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Enduro Builders and Climasure. A huge thank you to these incredible businesses for supporting the podcast and helping us spread the word about better buildings to live and breathe in. Your support makes this podcast possible. Please head over to their websites and follow their social pages.
Yeah, so Bluetooth. So we all have our
Yep.
Bluetooth, everything.
Yep.
Bluetooth phone, Bluetooth earphones,
Yeah.
our Bluetooth like location things for our, our air tags and stuff.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
So to try and quantify it, when I measured Bluetooth signal from my phone and devices, it's around 45,000 microwatts per meter squared. And we want to be aiming to get that below 10 microwatts per meter squared. So when you disable Bluetooth from your phone and switch from Bluetooth related things or not having them on all the time, you're significantly reducing your exposure levels. Yep.
So there are some easy wins, but it means that we have to give up quite a lot of our modern comforts,
It is a
doesn't
mindset
it?
shift, but in the
Yeah.
most recent house that I was in, I had the Ethernet cords and I didn't miss having Wi-Fi at my laptop and I had one for my phone. So it just meant that I was pretty much always sitting in the same spot in the house when I'm
Anyway, yeah.
scrolling on my phone. So you just put on airplane mode and connect my phone to the Ethernet. And for me, it makes a huge difference to how I feel when I'm using my phone for my
And what are
computer.
some of the symptoms that people who are sensitive to EMFs might experience?
Headaches, brain fog, tingling. I get a metallic taste in my mouth. Like I was just using Bluetooth earlier today. I was somewhere that I needed to use it, and after an hour, I just had to turn it off because it,
Mhm.
like really for me that it's much worse than the Wi-Fi.
So Bluetooth. So do you think that some people are more sensitive to Wi-Fi than Bluetooth and vice versa?
I haven't come across any examples of that. I would say if they're sensitive to one, they're sensitive to both. But it was at the home that I was just assessing recently for my final project. It was quite profound. It was the home of a doctor and his wife and mother, and all of them have been experiencing symptoms since they moved into this home that had been renovated 18 months ago and made healthy material choices. There was no mold. And what we did for the first part of the testing is that I powered the house down. So they had the opportunity to experience their living environment without all the Wi-Fi, without all the electrical. And then when I powered it back up again and was standing in the doctor's office, we were there for an hour, and the shift was immediate for him. He said he felt like he was stepping into a microwave. And the levels at his Wi-Fi extender, were 3 million microwatts per meter squared. That's at his desk that he was sitting at, that he sits at every day. And he's been experiencing deafness, and his deafness came back when he was sitting near that router. He experienced tingling, and after an hour of testing in his office there were problems with the lights and the dimmer switches and dirty electricity. And after an hour in that room, we all had to get out of there because there was so much going on there from an electrical point of view that it was too much for all of us.
So you were all sensitive to it. Wow. So we'll come back to that house in a minute. Actually, no, let's go more into that house now, because that is actually my next question. So
Okay, cool.
Could you tell us a bit about why you're testing this house and what you found?
Yeah, so I was testing this for my final electromagnetic radiation specialist certification test. So I had to go in, I do a pre-assessment plan, look at the floor plans, understand their health issues, and go in with a plan of what I was going to look for. And then I had to do 5 different types of tests, and I did 14 hours of testing. And so I was testing for radio frequency radiation, electric fields, magnetic fields. I did a body voltage test. So when they're lying in their bed and when he's at his desk, looking at how much their body voltage increases. And I was also testing circuit breaker panels. So where they were in their bedrooms, there was elevated body voltage because of the electric fields coming from the electrical panels. So I went there and I was able to identify which circuit breakers they need to turn off at night to get the body voltage to below 100. So in one of their rooms, it's meant that they've had to move the bed to the opposite side of the bedroom near the window. And within a night of doing that, they've already reported better sleep, which is just shows you how much of a difference such a simple change can make.
And what's the voltage?
So body voltage is understanding. So if you're lying in bed and you've got your lamp plugged in, there's hot electrical wiring, you're in an electric field, and we are electrically conductive. So our body acts as an antenna for that electric field, and our body voltage increases. So it's a really powerful way to be able to show people during testing what impact that electric field is having on their body.
Okay. And you have different meters to assess body voltage as to assess the other 6 things that you...
Yeah, some of them measure a few things. So this is one that I use for magnetic fields, electric fields, and body voltage. So I've got a plug that goes in here, and then they hold a probe. It also goes into an outlet, so it's grounded. And you can see a direct correlation between when the power's turned on and then when it's turned off, and then when you turn different electrical circuits off. It's quite eye-opening.
Yeah. So what else did you find in this home apart from body voltage changes?
Yeah, so one of the things I suspected was elevated levels of microsurge electrical pollution, also known as dirty electricity. I could see in their electrical plan they had, in the renovation, put dimmer switches and multi-way light switches throughout the house. And dimmer switches, multi-way. So when you can turn them on and off.
Using different switches?
Yeah. So they're often, it's not to say that they can't be used, but they're often not wired properly. And if there's wiring errors, they can contribute to elevated dirty electricity. So they've got elevated dirty electricity throughout their home. And it was interesting because Tim, the doctor, and his wife, Pam, had moved into a different room 5 days before I did the testing. And within that 5-day period, they noticed a number of symptoms. So Pam's asthma had gotten worse. They both had dry eyes and they were having trouble sleeping. And it's interesting because there is research on dirty electricity and asthma. There's a lady by the name of Magda Havas who did research and testing in schools and showed that when they address dirty electricity, student and staff wellbeing improved. And one of the improvements was with students who had asthma. So, I thought that was really interesting.
EMFs and asthma.
Yeah. Yep. There was also in the mother-in-law's room, she had really high body voltage as well, high level of radio frequency radiation. And where she's sleeping, she wakes up in the morning and her blood pressure is high. And when she gets up and starts moving around other areas of the house, her blood pressure drops. It was interesting for them seeing her body voltage and what the different tests that we did, because they then were wondering, well, is this having an impact on her blood pressure?
Wow. So she has one of those machines, one of those do-it-yourself machines at home to measure her blood pressure.
She must. Her son is the doctor. So yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. I can't believe that EMFs, it's the connection between EMFs and respiratory distress. Like that's you wouldn't think of it. You wouldn't make that connection.
No, but I mean, there's also like blood sugar and diabetes. There's research in that regard. There's a story about a building biologist in the USA that did testing on a family who had a home renovation, and there was no one in their family that had ever had diabetes. And after that renovation, their son, he was diagnosed with diabetes, and they then did testing, and he found, I think he was sleeping near the washing machine. I can't remember the exact exposures, but when they addressed the exposures, his diabetes symptoms disappeared.
Crazy. So of those 6, is there one that's worse? Is there a ranking?
The ones that we would see, building biologists would see as being the most problematic would be magnetic fields and RF radiation, radio frequency radiation.
Okay, and they come from, could you just go back again? Because I'm trying to keep up and keep all this in my brain, but there's so much information.
Yep. So radio frequency radiation, think of it as wireless technology. So power, phone towers, wireless devices, routers, and microwaves.
Okay.
And then magnetic fields could be anything, any appliance that's plugged in and drawing current.
Okay.
But it could also come in from the electricity grid through metal water pipes. Reinforced concrete can carry those magnetic fields throughout the home, and that contributes to stray current.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. I'll try to remember. So for builders and homeowners who are curious but confused, like me, about EMFs, what are some practical science-based ways to assess and reduce exposure during design and build?
Yep. So at the beginning of a home project, ideally, say it's a block of land that you're about to build on, is to get the radio frequency readings from. So you're looking at what the nearby exposures might be from phone towers or neighboring properties, and also magnetic fields. So are there anything coming from power lines or anything underground that could be contributing to elevated levels? And then drawing up the design and making material selections based on that. If there's a part of the site where there's really high exposure levels from a phone tower, then maybe not having the sleeping areas there, or even looking, if you're going to build 2 stories up, ideally getting readings at that height, because like in the last home that I was in, the 2nd story I was impacted by a nearby phone tower, but on the ground level I was fine.
Wow.
It could then also inform material choices. It could be the difference between whether you're going to have a light frame construction or a high mass wall system, because there are materials like concrete or rammed earth that are really effective at blocking radio frequency radiation.
Yeah.
So that should inform the design, and then ideally doing testing at different stages of construction. So at rough-in stage, so when the wiring's in, but before you're putting the plasterboard in, testing for any wiring errors, and then post-build, doing post-build verification, and then ideally 1 month after construction, once the family's moved in and they've got all their devices and things in there, doing an assessment then as well.
And post-build verification requires someone like you to come in with your gauges and just take some readings.
Yeah, and I went to one of those recently in California, and it was quite straightforward, because such care had gone into the renovation that there weren't many exposures, because it had all been addressed at the design stage, which just, what a dream for this homeowner.
Yeah. We have one project that I did a blower door test on. They had excuse me. They had a giant piece of metal attached to the backside of one of their internal walls, because on the other side of that wall they had, I think must have been a meter box or was an internal wall. Could have been. They had something. I'm not sure what it was going to be. But what could that have been for? Could you take a guess at what they might have been trying to achieve there?
So if they've
Is that
got
something you can do inside a house, is to create like blocking walls?
Look, it's something you would only ever do under the guidance of a electromagnetic radiation specialist, because I would think that would be done in an attempt to block an outside source of radio frequency radiation, or from a smart meter. But there are implications. I don't want to make you confused, but an electrically conductive material needs to be grounded. So if you put metal there, if you put shielding paint, it needs to be grounded so that any electric fields get safely dissipated into the ground.
Well, that was my question. Like, doesn't it
Yeah.
conduct electricity as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not something that, I get people reaching out saying, oh, we've got a meter panel that's going behind a bedroom. What can we do? And you really, really do need to understand what are the environmental factors at play to then be able to implement a solution, and also test before and after, and make sure that there's not unintended consequences.
So is there anything else you can add to that question about reducing exposure during design and construction? Like any practical design solutions apart from testing rough-in and testing post construction? Like, what is is there a design feature that can be implemented? Kind of like this panel I was talking about. Is there any other sort of solutions like that? Or is it just about proximity?
A lot of it is proximity.
Yeah.
Definitely material selections. It really depends on the specific. So at the place that I'm staying at the moment, there's a phone tower in the distance. And the first 2 nights here, I didn't sleep. And then I did some testing and realized that in that bedroom there, had really high exposure levels, but they significantly dropped off there because there's a bit of a concrete wall that goes out from behind the bed head that's reducing the levels there. So it's really about getting an understanding of where the exposures are and taking steps to reduce.
Yep. And does the exposure come through the wiring, or does it come at the plug? Like, is there fields coming out of, because there's wiring all through our ceilings and all through our walls.
Yeah.
Is
So
the radiation or the fields coming out of just the plug?
No, it's coming out of the outlet and the wiring. But another strategy for electric fields from wiring is metal clad cabling. So that is more expensive. And some people might do that in specific areas like their bedrooms.
Kind of like your earphones.
So the other thing I was just thinking about is power lines. So I had a client that she got an EMF assessment before her renovation and realized that where they were going to put the child's bedroom was really close to power lines and elevated levels of magnetic fields. By having that information, they were able to put the child's bedroom in another part of the property that would significantly reduce their exposure levels. And that is a really important decision because there's links between AC magnetic field exposure from power lines and childhood leukemia.
Yep. So bedroom placement, out of all the rooms and zones in a house, would you say that bedroom placement is the most important?
Yes.
Yeah, because this is where we spend the majority of our time.
Yeah, so it's where our bodies are resting and repairing and when we're most vulnerable to outside influences. Yep.
Okay, so from a practical perspective, let's just try and summarize. Keep your sleeping areas as far away from switchboards, smart meters, power lines,
solar
as possible.
inverters,
Yep.
HVAC, AC units, hot water systems, all the electricals should be well away from sleeping areas, working areas, and like if there's couches where people are spending a lot of time.
Okay. And ditch your microwave if you can shift your mindset.
Ditch your microwave. Avoid dimmer switches.
Yep.
Avoid having a lot of headaches. Keep the wiring simple. Avoid multi-wave light switches unless they're wired properly.
So that's 3. What about,
solar panel placement?
Solar panel placement? Yep. I haven't crossed over that one. So that one, where should they be?
Ideally separate from the house, and having the inverter.
I see.
Away from living, sleep, and work areas.
That can be tricky on small blocks. Most people just put them on the roof because that's where you get the solar access, and it doesn't take up any extra land.
Yeah, I have heard of stories of, like, for instance, people, like someone in a tiny home and she put the solar panels on a trailer next to the house.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. And those isolator switches, that must be expensive though, like getting that extra wiring by an electrician during construction, like getting that designed in and getting that built, that would cost more money, wouldn't it? Which is often a barrier for people.
To be honest, I don't know how much more it costs at the beginning of a build. I would think it would maybe more expensive to do down the track. But I guess you've got to think about this. What's the cost to your health down the track?
I know. Yeah. It's always it's that balancing act and figuring out what your priorities are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you for those hot tips. I hope that the listener, if you are sensitive to electromagnetic fields in any way, some of those tips might really help. I know that my daughter's bed is backing onto a smart meter, and I have been meaning to move it for months now, and I haven't done it. And I take that back. I did do it. Her bed is actually moved. I switched her bed around. I take that back. So that was based on some advice from some people in the building biology space. So Yeah,
Right. That's a big
one
win for
simple
your
thing
startup.
that I have done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute. There is some disagreement around EMFs and what impact they actually have on the human body. Now, the impact that it's had on your body and the people that you have been studying with is very real. But what do you say to people who disagree that there is a connection?
Well, I think it's really important to do due diligence beyond a quick search. And, often people will say to me, I've asked ChatGPT or I've gone and done a quick Google search and it's, there's no concerns. And in this field, you do need to have some understanding of what framing and what to actually look for. I would say, firstly, to go and look at the bioinitiative report. It's one of the most important piece of medical literature, and it will give you an idea of, decades worth of studies. There's 20 doctors and public health experts that have written that. The other thing I would say is that the human body is an electrical system. Our houses are increasingly electrified, and human beings are 70% water. So our nerves, tissues, and cells conduct electricity. And this is something that we've known for decades. A brilliant book is one called The Body Electric, which was written in the 80s by Dr. Robert Becker and Gary Selden. And yeah, so that's not in disagreement that human beings are electrically conductive. And our homes are being increasingly electrified. And to think that we can do that without it having some impact on the body, I think that's something that's worth looking further into. And as I mentioned before, we can demonstrate exposures through body voltage testing. We might not be able to see EMFs or smell them or hear them, but it is measurable and it is quantifiable. And, there's a saying that what gets measured gets improved. And there's so much focus in the building science space on measuring indoor air quality. So measuring humidity, measuring CO2, measuring VOCs. And I would love to see the building science world this start to become a natural evolution of this conversation, because electrode pollution is an indoor environmental toxin. And if we haven't addressed that, then we can't really call it a healthy home.
I will put the links to that report and that book in the show notes. So if you, the listener, are interested in learning more about this discussion today, please go to the show notes and you'll be able to access those documents.
And I also, I just want to add, so the World Health Organization has classified radiofrequency radiation as a 2B carcinogen, and there's enough evidence. Long-time advisors to the World Health Organization are saying to classify it as a group 1 known carcinogen to humans agent. So that the World Health Organization isn't disagreeing about the impact that has on the human body. So I think that's important for people to be aware of. And as you said, in dismissing it and not being willing to go further and do the due diligence, and we're discounting the experiences of people who have really legitimate sensitivities and issues that need to be considered and addressed in home design and construction.
And is this something like kind of like mold, where 25% of us are sensitive to mold and biotoxins in mold? Are EMFs similar, where some people are sensitive and some aren't?
Mold sensitivity and EMF sensitivity go hand in hand. So I can't quantifiably say 1 in 4 people are EMF sensitive, but I know that anyone who's mold sensitive is EMF sensitive. And what I've also found is that I know of many people who do not consider themselves electrically sensitive, but, they've been working next to their Wi-Fi router or sleeping next to their Wi-Fi router or sleeping near an electrical panel, and they've had headaches, or they haven't been able to sleep, and they've made adjustments and they've been able to sleep better, or their headaches have gone. So I think it is impacting people in ways that they may not realize, and they may not have connected the dots, which is also, I think, quite an empowering message, that by making simple changes, I think there are a lot of people that are spending their days not feeling as well as they could. And if they just made some simple adjustments in their daily behaviors, tech habits, where their bed's located, they could actually feel a lot better.
I think the intersection of mold and EMFs, these are all things that in our homes, where we spend most of our time, and in our workplaces. And if the combination of these two things could be really fully brought to light, I'm really wondering how the health industry would be changed. Measuring the invisible is something that really got me into this space, in just simply measuring air tightness.
Yeah.
Doing blower door testing and thermal imaging, and then, as you say, measuring CO2s, measuring humidity, measuring temperature, measuring VOCs, and then now onto EMFs. These are all invisible things that we don't think about day to day, but impact us every single minute of every single day. And it just doesn't come into most of our thinking. And I think we should just really stay curious. I highly recommend that, even if you are someone who doesn't necessarily believe that there is a connection, stay curious, always seek to understand and do your research and don't discount it, because the more, information is power, and we can make much better decisions when we have more information. And EMFs is not something I have thought a lot about, and I don't understand it really, but I am definitely curious.
Yep. And, we wouldn't, if we had cigarette smoke coming into our home 24/7, would you allow that?
No, absolutely not. I can't stand the smell. It's horrid.
So yeah, it is radio frequency radiation. It's the same as, again, it's not to scare people, but we can reduce our exposure levels so that it's not just beaming at, high frequencies like 3 million microwatts per meter squared constantly in our living spaces.
Yeah, you can just never know really what, we various health symptoms that we get. Like, I get these really weird ocular migraines, where I get these really weird kind of visions out the side of my face. And they take about 20 minutes to go away. My vision goes strange. I don't get any headaches, but there's absolutely no explanation for why they come on. And potentially, who knows, one of these sorts of issues could be responsible. Who knows? It's there is so much unknown.
Yeah, it's definitely worth doing some experimenting, maybe try one thing to reduce your daily exposure and see if it makes a difference.
Yeah. What so far, Zara, has been the most rewarding part of your career?
Without doubt, the incredible home designers and builders that I've got to meet and work with, yourself included, through this work. I describe it as the gift that keeps on giving, because to see the knowledge that I share get applied in real world projects in such an impactful and tangible way, and knowing that that's getting paid forward. I had Zach, a builder that recently completed our mastermind, say that what he's learned is going to benefit every single one of his clients for the next 100 years. Yeah, so that's definitely the best part about it.
All we ever want when we go into our careers is to make a difference.
Yep.
And it sounds like you're making a difference. So
Thank you, as I do.
If you could fast forward 10 years, what change would you love to see in how we design and build our homes in Australia, but also globally?
Every single home is built with health first principles in mind. So we're looking at the health impacts of materials. We're taking measures to prevent mold, and low EMF design and construction principles are implemented on every project.
I'd love to see that too. And where do you think the market is headed globally in regards to EMFs?
This time in the USA, the last 4 weeks has been really interesting. I'm certainly seeing growing demand at the high end of the market from health conscious homeowners. They're not just wanting healthy materials and mold prevention strategies. EMF is a non-negotiable. So I definitely think that this is where the market is heading. It's these top 3 environmental toxins being addressed on healthy home builds.
Okay, so Zara, I know that there are some, we do have naysayers. We do have people who think that anyone who is immersed in the EMF game is going too far with it, or there's a lot of confirmation bias and there's not enough peer-reviewed studies. And this is something that I know that you must come up against, people who think that, who maybe don't believe that this is as big a problem as what your research is showing you. So
yeah.
What do you say? What do you say to that?
So the first thing I would say, yes, I've definitely had to grow a thick skin in order to speak publicly about this, because it does seem to be a topic that it is triggering for people. But this is something that I have literally spent thousands of hours immersed in peer-reviewed medical studies, training, and my mentors they're electrical engineers. They are electricians, not just electromagnetic radiation specialists who have been in this field for 30 years. And so it's all coming from a science, evidence-based background.
Mm-hmm. And what sorts of pushback do you get?
To be honest, the pushback I get is, once people have taken the time to understand and been willing to listen to see the research presented to them. So you were part of my Smart Homes, Healthy Homes webinar in June, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that, I presented the background, the many different known health effects and studies by scientists and doctors all over the world, the regulatory landscape, which I think is really important for people to understand. So we know that to build a home that supports human health, we need to be building better than the minimum standard in the construction code. It's like that in the world of radio frequency standards and regulation around technology. Unfortunately, today's standards are decades out of date with what the latest scientific research shows. So one of the arguments that will come up is people will say, well, it's non-ionizing radiation, therefore it's safe. If you go onto ChatGPT and ask about, are EMFs harmful to human health, or say, no, non-ionizing radiation is safe. And That's simply not the case because
What's
it only takes in,
non-ionizing radiation?
so that's radio frequency radiation, so from
Okay.
wireless technology. But
Okay.
today's regulatory standards only take into account the degree to which body tissue heats up, so the known thermal effects, right?
Mhm.
But there's thousands of studies about the known biological effects that are not taken into consideration by
Mhm.
today's regulatory standards. I think people need to be aware that, yeah, the standards are out of date, and there is a lot of research and evidence that isn't incorporated into today's exposure standards. So just as we need to be proactive in educating ourselves on building health and mold prevention and healthier materials, we need to be proactive in educating ourselves on how electromagnetic field exposures can impact the body, because our electrical standards are designed to prevent shock, fire, and injury. They do not take into consideration the known biological effects of electromagnetic. Oh, so I mean, well, the other thing I was going to say on that tangent, you were part of that webinar, and I had home designers and builders. Only 15 of them were people that had been through our mastermind. I was surprised by how many of them had not. We had electricians, smart home technology people, thermal
Mhm.
performance assessors, and I didn't get any backlash. Once they'd
Mhm.
spent an hour listening to the evidence that I had to share, all the feedback afterwards was like, well, the evidence is clear, it's very
Mhm.
compelling, and you need to take this out further. Like, if they want to understand this one specific type, they
Mhm.
get, if they want to do their due diligence, here's a starting point. Because once people have given up an hour of their time to listen, they're pretty convinced. And I
And
mean,
this is why it's so important to stay curious. If you close your mind to things you don't know about or don't understand, you are so
yeah,
limited.
yeah,
And like I said, I don't know anything about EMFs. I do know that I move my daughter's bed because that seems to me to make sense. That's a practical thing I
yeah,
can do that's easy and it makes sense.
yeah,
Even if it makes zero difference to her health, it still is a sensible thing to do,
yeah,
even if she's not sensitive. And I think that it, you know, just opening up your mind to the possibilities.
yeah. And
Why
I mean,
wouldn't
the
you?
other thing, I don't want to scare people, but the takeaway from me from this home assessment is that this family have just spent a fortune on renovating a home that they've purchased to move into as a healing sanctuary. And they've now found out through 14 hours of testing that there's all these issues that they thought that they were working with an electrician that knew what he was
Mm,
doing. Can
mm,
you imagine how they're feeling now?
mm,
And what happens in the next decade if we've got home designers and builders that are saying, hey, I build healthy homes, and they've addressed condensation and mold, and they've addressed
mhm.
the health impacts of materials, but they haven't addressed EMFs. And the people that move into these homes go and get meters, or they get their home assessed, and they find out that there's issues that weren't addressed in the renovation. This becomes a liability issue.
Yeah, it potentially does. There's nothing in the building code that says that EMFs have to be addressed yet, but who's to say it won't in the future?
No, but it also becomes a trust and reputational issue. If you say that I'm designing and building healthy homes and this has been overlooked, and the family later says, well, hang on, this was supposed to be healthy, and actually I'm being exposed to RF levels or magnetic fields in the ranges of extreme or severe concern, which is not uncommon in most homes, that becomes a major issue.
Well, I think whether the listener believes this or whether they're, just on the beginning of their, learnings about this sort of
Yeah.
topic, this conversation is valuable to anyone who is listening to it. And
Yeah.
all it takes is one question, Googling one thing. Do you think that Googling is a good thing with EMFs?
No,
No.
no, because I think Google and AI results are generally skewed. It's actually quite interesting because I'll ask a question, and then it will give me a response that I know is not correct, and then I'll give it more input, and then it will then say, oh,
Just like,
actually,
oh, thank you for that
you've
information, and I
raised
was
a really
incorrect.
important you'll raise a really important point, and then it will flip the narrative. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. You need to be going direct to, like, PubMed, the world leading medical database. You need to be going straight to databases, credible databases, rather than relying on Google or AI to pull up the information that you're looking for.
And have you got a list of credible databases that you can give me that I can put in the show notes for people to do their own research rather than Google and ChatGPT?
I think the FIO initiative report is the best starting point. It is, like, if you were to print it out, it's a folder that big. So one of my mentors, Larry Gust, who's been in this field for 30 years, when he's going to do home assessments and people are questioning the science and the research, he puts that folder on their on their table and says,
Mic
here it
drop.
is. Yeah.
Is that a free resource? Can we download that?
Yes, it is. And there are color charts. So we'll show you the different observed health effects at different exposure levels that are well below today's standards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And also
All right.
look at the Environmental Health Trust is a really valuable resource as well. You'll get a very good idea of what's going on internationally. So there are countries like Cyprus, Austria, Russia, France that have taken really proactive steps in terms of ripping out Wi-Fi in schools, public education campaigns, Israel as well. So I think once you get to understand more of that international perspective, you start to go, hang on, what are we missing here in Australia? Then you also see that, Children's Health Defence in the USA successfully sued the Federal Communications Commission for inadequate exposure standards. So yeah, there's lots of examples on Environmental Health Trusts of court cases and research findings that I think are well worth having a look at.
And what do you say to people who believe it's all just confirmation bias?
I would say it's really important to take some time to explore the opposite of what you currently believe to be true and look at some credible peer-reviewed studies and views of a growing number of scientists and medical doctors all over the world that are publishing important studies in relation to this.
I guess just because it's not a widely known topic doesn't mean it's not true and not important.
Yeah, I actually also want to just talk about a webinar that I was on earlier this year with Dr. Paul Theroux, who is he has a PhD and he publishes studies in relation to this very topic. And it was very interesting. At the end of our session, he referred to us in the building biology space as really valuable kins in this field, because he said even with if you've got $1 million funded study, the people that are actually gathering the data don't have the level of training that we do in detection and mitigation. And what we're seeing every day through our assessments is actually really valuable data that could help shape our understanding of this field. So I thought it was really incredible that someone at his level sees such value in the work that we as electromagnetic radiation specialists are doing, and also just highlighted how there is a lot more work to be done to improve public understanding of this field.
It's always really hard to go against the masses and swim against the tide. So well done for the having the guts it takes to stick to what you believe.
Thanks, Jess. I really appreciate it.
And the final question, we're at the final question time. It's the same question I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is the one thing that you have learned in your career that you would like the listener to know?
I would say that it's rarely black and white, and to stay curious and to always be questioning ourselves on how we've arrived at the conclusions we've arrived at, and surrounding ourselves with peers that will challenge us and present new perspectives. And just always being willing to revisit how we've arrived at the conclusions we've formed on various environmental health topics.
Always question your assumptions. I think that's very good advice. All right, Zara, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thanks, Jess, for having me. I really appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
Awesome, I will. You too.
That is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. There will be another episode in a fortnight, so if you would like to listen into the types of conversations that I have all the time, please subscribe on your chosen platform. Rate the show, leave a comment, whatever you like, share with your friends and family. I'd love for you to spread the word about the Building Sciology Potty. There's a link in the episode description where you can head to a landing page, and there are some show notes there with relevant links and a full transcript of the show as well, and also links to my socials. So if you're not already, I'd love for you to follow along there too, as I share lots of building science and building biology tips. Thanks again. I'll be back in 2 weeks, so until then, happy healthy building.